Hello chess friends and welcome to out of Chess channel and welcome back to the TCEC Cup finals in 2021. We have reached now the semi-final stage, and in the semi-finals we have now the two match games between the top engine Scorpion and Stockfish, and also between Lila C0 and the Dragon engine. So we haven't covered so far gameplay by the Dragon engine. We have covered so far Stockfish game, also some games that were played by Lila C0. Let's check out now how the Dragon engine is playing, because the Dragon engine proved itself recently as the third force in the computer chess world, and the Dragon engine, for instance, is also playing in the super final in Fisher Random Chess. Now also the tournament is going on against Stockfish, so the Dragon engine is really a great chess engine. So as I said, it will be a tough battle between the Lila C0 and Dragon engine for the super final. So let's check out now one great game here played by Dragon against another top engine Igel. Igel is of course in German the hedgehog, so I hope again that you like our hedgehog picture here, so be prepared. This was again a really beautiful game that was played in top engine level with some beautiful strategical and tactical elements in the Grünfeld defense. So let's check out now the game. The Dragon opened here with the move d4. We have knight to f6 by Eagle. We have c4, g6, knight to c3, d5. We have the Grunfeld defense on the board, and after c takes d5, knight to d5, e4, the normal line of course. We have knight takes c3, b takes c3, and now the last prearranged move by the organizer was now the move c5, which is of course the most natural approach here of black. So that's what I like, as I said, in this cup events, because the prearranged line is not bad for black, it's not bad for white, it's not bad for any opponent. So that's why the prearranged line is really one of the most popular openings now these days. So that's why I like more this cup finals. But there is a huge problem when it comes to maybe to attract people to watch the super event, because many games of course end in a draw. And now in this other semi-finals, for instance, Stockfish is playing against this other engine Scorpio, and the result is 10 points for Stockfish and also 10 points for Scorpio, and they only played draw. So that's the bad part of not prearranging some bad opening lines, because in this TCEC league formats that we have seen, the prearranged line is sometimes bad for one opponent, and then of course the other end has a huge advantage in the early stage of the game. So that's why I think I like more, as I said, this cup event, because we can really meet normal and healthy ideas in chess, the most important ideas. For instance, also here in the Grünfeld defense, here after move c5 we have reached now again a position that has been played, I don't know, maybe millions and millions of times in chess history. So here after move c5 we have to protect of course our center, but here the Dragon engine played an interesting idea, which is now the move bishop to b5, because most of the times black is using this light square bishop as an attacker against the potential knight on f3. Then the bishop is pinning maybe the knight, and the knight is controlling the center of the board. So many times black is using also this idea. Also, this bishop to g4 idea comes with the idea to stop maybe white progress with the move h4, h5. Then you could have maybe a protection here around the square h5 when maybe white is launching an early h4 attack. So that's why after a potential h4, many times black can maybe go into this line, bishop to g4 when the knight is of course here. Then black can of course also stop the h5 progress. So here with the move bishop to b5, white is hoping to trade off the light square bishop in order to get also rid of this very annoying light square bishop of black. So that's actually what happened. Here we have bishop to d7, we have bishop takes d7, and now after a move knight to d7, knight to f3, here played by Dragon, and now bishop to g7. And now the fun already starts, because here again you see the Dragon engine is launching an early flank attack, which is now very popular, I think, in this top engine level, because recently we have also covered a great gameplay by Lila C0 in which also Lila C0 launched an early flank attack against the Grünfeld fianchetto. For instance, we have already a new game in move 10. This position has never been reached in chess history. At least there are no games in the database in this particular lines. Maybe there have been played some games, maybe, I don't know, in low rated played games. But here after move h4, it's obviously already a tricky position here for black, because if you castle immediately here from black's perspective, then of course you will get the h5 move, and then in the continuation of the game you can expect of course this idea: bishop to e3, queen to d2, then of course the queen and bishop battery, then we are trying, of course, to trade off the dark square bishops here on the h file, and then sneak in with the queen on the h file, and then even deliver checkmate on the h file. So that's the actual goal of this early flank attack. So that's why after move h4 here, this Eagle engine found really a great way how to defend this position, at least for a while. Played now, of course, the move queen to a5, attacking now the c3 pawn. So in the continuation, we have bishop to d2. You see, white is forced now to play a passive move with the dark square bishop. We don't want to have the bishop like this, but at least for a while we can protect the position like this, because we need this bishop in order to trade it off, in order to create further weaknesses in front of black's king. So, but actually what the Eagle engine is doing here is also a great strategy. Eagle is not castling immediately. It's waiting also a little bit to see what white will do, because white's king is also stuck in the center. Whenever you feel that your opponent is stuck with the king in the center, maybe it's time for you also to stay with your king in the center, because you don't have to rush into casting positions. You maybe can stay also a little bit longer with your king and stay like here Eagle did in the continuation of the game. So Eagle first blocked out the potential progress of whites with the move h6, because if you play now h5, then you have a great supporter. Then of course we can pass through with the move g5, and in this particular position black has solved now all of the position problems, can then eventually also castle here on the king side. So here after move h6, we have now a4 here by the dragon engine. The idea about this move a4 is, if black, for instance, plays now the move c takes d4, then of course we have c takes d4. It comes with a tempo here, but the problem is after queen to b6 or queen to a6 that we can play, I think, even queen to e2. After queen to e2, king to e2, white will reach now already the endgame stage, but I think white's pieces are much more active, because we have already maneuvered our king from the first rank, and now I think white is much faster when it comes to occupying here the c file. White would be much faster, maybe even to occupy here the weak square on c7. And the cool part about this a4 move, that it blocks potential progress of blacks, because black is here, of course, a 2 versus 1 pawn majority. Here maybe black could create a very nice position, could create of course a pass pawn. So that's why here after move a4, finally, it's Eagle is almost like saying, okay, now you have created many weaknesses, now I can castle, I can secure the king by castling, because the pawn structure is already dynamic. And now maybe Eagle is trying also to create some pawn breakthroughs with a6 b5, and then maybe launch here also flank attack with potential b4 move. So in the continuation of the game, we have now casting also by the dragon engine, which is, I think, also sometimes a risky idea, because you have already weakened the pawn structure in front of the king, but actually the pawn structure of blacks is also weakened. So both engines have weakened pawn structures in front of the king, so that's why it's a sort of a dynamic position, but there's not a good way anymore for any engine to attack the king after castling. Now the game is basically centralized. The game is basically transposing into central attacks, because now the whole battle is of course around the square d4. So here we have e6, we have queen to e2, we have rook to c8, and now rook to e1. We have a queen to c7, and now a very important idea here by the dragon engine. The dragon engine realized that this knight on d7 doesn't have good squares on the board. Even if you try some knight to f6 ideas, then still it can be kicked away with potential e5 moves. In the continuation, we have now a6 by Eagle, and now rook to b1, also protecting this further progress here by maybe a pawn move with the move b5. So here we have rook to b8, now e5, blocking further the potential progress of the knight. And now after move b5, I think 99% of us would do something like this, would simply take a takes b6, but the problem is now that the knight will come into the game with the move knight to b6, and now maybe black could search for this outpost. The black could search maybe after c takes d4 for a good square here around the square d5. If black cements the position around the square d5, that could be actually a good position. But the problem is also in this scenario that the knight is hanging. So first of all, I think, the pawn is hanging, then you should probably play something like rook to b6 first, secure the position, and then maybe search for knight to b6, knight to d5 idea. So here in the continuation, we have now after move b5 here, dragging the dragon engine left the position like this, didn't want to touch anything anymore on the queen side, because now this pawn on a5 is holding this square on b6, so the knight cannot jump here, the knight cannot jump also on f6, the knight cannot jump here on e5, and the knight, of course, after c takes d4, c takes d4, cannot even jump on c5. So the knight on d7 is a little bit paralyzed, the knight on d7 is of course a little bit out of game, and that's actually the beauty of this game. I think the dragon engine shows here really great strategical elements, a really nice positional play by the dragon engine. Here after move rook to e1, if you take, as I said, a takes b6, rook to b6 is of course the main line, and then of course black doesn't have any more positional problems in the continuation of the game. So here after move rook to e1, we have rook to c8, we have bishop to f4, cementing further the center. We have c takes d4, we have c takes d4, and although this is now a backward pawn on d4, still it's really hard to attack it, because first of all it is protected by the knight, the bishop is a little bit out of game, and in order to maybe improve the knight's position, you would be forced to play 1, 2, 3, 4 times just in order to make one move with one good square for the knight. I don't see this as a good strategic idea, because meanwhile white is doing something. White can always play something like queen to e3, attack further the h6 weakness, can also play maybe in some occasions g4, g5 and similar stuff. Will probably find an attack to attack also the weakened pawn structure in front of black's king. So that's why, in my opinion, this maneuver of the knight to jump on d5 would be simply too slow. So that's why here after move c takes d4, we have queen to c3, queen to e4, queen to c6. Here the Eagle engine is desperately trying to trade off the queens, tries to simplify the game by trading off the queens. But here after move queen to e3, here the dragon engine shows really great attacking skills, because there is not even a good way how to protect this pawn anymore. Because if you play now king to h7, we can play now the move h5, and the h5 move is actually a really great move, because even if you pass through with the move g5, then you have a brilliant tactic. You can play bishop to g5, we have h takes g5, knight to g5, and here comes the problem. After king to g8, we can play a calm move, knight to e4. Knight to e4 is really tricky, because now in the next move we can play h6 and then followed with queen to g5, knight to f6 is coming. After queen to g5, we can even play rook to e3, rook to g3, so black is simply tactically lost. So this h6 move is basically now the main issue, and as I said, here the engine, for instance, gives a +3 evaluation here for white. So here after move queen to e3, again the Eagle engine tried to simplify the game by trading off the queens, but now the h6 pawn is hanging. Queen takes e3, bishop to e3, knight to b8, and finally g4. Here the dragon engine is finally also trying to create a pass pawn on the h file. So here in the continuation, we have knight to c6, h5, knight to b4. Here was of course the threat of the fork on c2. We have rook to b1, knight to c2, and now rook to e2. Here knight takes e3 doesn't bring you so much, because here white can simply take, f takes e3, and white can of course cement further the pawn chain. White is continuing the game with an extra pawn and has now a dominant position. In the continuation of the game, we can even play knight to d2, knight to e4, and again search for outposts, maybe here on d6, on c5, on f6, and similar stuff. So there are simply too many weak squares in black's position. So here after move rook to e2, the Eagle engine didn't take the bishop, played simply here rook to b8, supporting now also this pass pawn on the b file. We have h takes g6, f takes g6, and now knight to e1. Very pragmatic idea to trade off finally the knights on the board. We have knight to a3, attacking the rook, but now rook to b3, again a counter attack. We have bishop to f8, and now knight to g2. Here the dragon engine is searching for new opportunities. These are of course clear targets, the weak squares, the weak pawns, pardon me, here on g6, but also here on e6. So here rook to c6, we have knight to h4 attacking the pawn, king to f7, we have king to g2, and now bishop to e7 attacking the knight. And now a very cool move here by the dragon engine, bishop to h6, because you cannot actually take bishop takes h4. Of course we can also take out this one, then the game is simplified, and again white is continuing the game with an extra pawn. Now in the continuation, rook to f3 would be also a serious threat, so it's not so good, I think, here for black to trade off more pieces. So here after move bishop to h6, we have a rook to g8, rook to f3, a check. After king to e8, now comes really a brilliant move by the dragon engine. Maybe you can pause the video and try to see now the best continuation here for white. It's not so easy to see. It's really wild tactic that the dragon engine pulled off here. So okay, here dragon played a very aggressive rook to f6. The problem is now, of course, this pawn is hanging on g6. In the continuation, Eagle accepted the challenge. Took simply the rook for the bishop. Here we have e takes f6, we have king to f7, but now comes a brilliant move. We have now knight to f3. If you don't react, then you will get here this very annoying knight to e5. So that's why king to f6 here played by Eagle, but now bishop to g5, king to g7. There is simply not a good square here. If you play, of course, king to f7, then you get the fork and you lose simply the rook. So that's why you have only one square. That's the main issue of this tactic. Brilliant tactic here by the dragon engine. Bishop to g5, king to g7, and now d5. This is now a brilliant move. There is simply not a good way here to defend this position, even if you take here e takes d5. That was played in the game, but even if you try maybe to play sort of a blockade with the move rook to d6, then you get here bishop to e7, and the knight is hanging here on a3. So that's why you cannot protect anymore this position. In the continuation of the game, e takes d5 was played by Eagle, but now you get this one, rook to e7. There is again only one good square, king to h8. You cannot cover in a different way, and now knight to d4. You see the knight comes into the game. Black's problem, I think, in this position is that the knight is simply too far away from the action. White's pieces are dancing. There are several dark square problems in front of black's king. In one particular moment, bishop to f6 is going to happen. So again, really black is in tactical problems. So here after move knight to d4, we have rook to c8, we have now knight to e6, king to g8, and now rook to g7. First the check, king to h8, and now rook to g6. That was a brilliant tactic. So you see the dragon engine took another pawn, which means now that these two pawns are connected, and what the dragon engine has now is of course a minor piece and two connected pawns for the rook. But we have also to say that the king is really endangered, because let's see now the continuation. Here we have king to h7, again a new check, we have king to h8, and after rook to e7. The problem is now you cannot bring your knight into the game. You cannot bring your piece back, because you get simply bishop to f6, king to g8, and here we can simply proceed. Even if you try, as I said, to bring your knight towards the center of the board, you get this one. That's, I think, something that we have to notice in this position. This is now the main tactical threat. Rook to g7. If you play, of course, king to h8, then you get this one, knight to f4 with knight to g6 ideas, and there's not even a good way to protect this anymore. It's a checkmate in one. So that's the mating net that here the dragon engine has built. It's always something that bothers, I think, black in the continuation of the game. So black cannot play freely with his pieces, with his knights. As I said, the knight cannot get back into the game. The knight has to be here on the queen side. So here after move rook to e7, in the continuation king to g8, bishop to f6. As I said, we have rook to c7, knight takes c7, we have a rook to f6, but now rook to d7, also attacking now the weakness, and it seems so that this should be a drawer's position. But again, the activity of white's pieces is much better. Again, I'm pointing out we have two connected pawns, and the problem is now the black's king is out of game. The black's king is cut off. There is not a good way to include the king into the game. Even if you try some ideas here, even if we trade some pieces, then you lose this pawn. Probably you lose also this pawn. This pawn is then marching. We have still these two connected pawns. So even trading off the rooks is not an option here for black. So yeah, if we move rook to d7, we have knight to c4, king to g3, d4. If you take here knight to a5, it's not so good because you get simply this one, knight to d5. You have to bring your rook somewhere, and then f4. And the problem is now, again, white is much better because you cannot immediately push the pawn on b4. White is faster. White will play f5, g5, king to f4, and similar ideas. So again, white will make further progress here on the king side. So it's not so easy for black to make progress on the queen side. So here, after move king to g3, we have d4, rook to d4, knight takes a5, and now rook to d8. First a check. We have rook to f8, and now rook to d5. Again, stopping black's progress. You cannot play, of course, b4 because you lose simply the knight on a5. Again, you see the dragging engine is blocking the potential progress of blacks. We have rook to f6, we have f4, we have knight to b7, rook to e5, rook to c6, and now knight to d5. Again, stopping this progress, but also preventing a very annoying check maybe here on the third rank. So king to f8, we have now g5. You see how white is simply slightly faster when it comes to pushing pawns, so where we have the advantage, which is now of course on the king side. Black has of course the advantage on the queen side, but black never had the opportunity to make further progress with this pawn. So here, after move g5, we have knight to d6, we have king to g4, a5, and now knight to e7, attacking the rook, rook to c7, and now knight to f4. Knight to f5, pardon me, brilliant move here by the dragging engine, because if you play knight to f5, rook to f5 comes with a check, and then we simply take out this pawn, and then in the potential endgame, these two connected pawns means that of course white is winning this game in every particular continuation. So really wild tactics, endgame brilliancy here by the dragging engine. After move knight to f5, we have knight to c4. Again, here rook takes b5, nothing romantically changed here. Again, dragon wins a simple pawn. So king to f7, knight to h6, a check. We have king to e6, f5. White is making further progress. Knight to king to d6, g6. We have king to c6, rook to b1, and now again, of course, using the king in the attack. Now the main issue is this move f6. So knight to e5, f6 is not a possibility immediately because rook to g6 will happen. But here knight to g4 is of course a cool idea. Simplify the game by trading off the knights. We have knight to d3, and finally f6, rook to g8, f7, knight to f4, first a check. We have here king to g5. The problem is now you cannot play king takes g6 because we'll simply take out this one, and the problem is you cannot bring your rook to f6 going behind this pawn because of course the knight is controlling this very important square. So after move king to g5, we have knight to e6, we have king to f6. Finally, here rook takes g6. Black has to give up further material in order to stop white's progress with the pawn. King to g6, knight to f8. We have king to f5. Here king to c7, and here after rook to a1, we have king to b6. And here a very cool idea by the dragging engine. Here the dragon has of course different possibilities. It's obviously completely winning endgame here, but the cool part is that the dragging engine calculated this position and sacrificed the rook for a pawn. And it seems so that black could even defend this position, because after king to a5, knight to e5, because the problem is now black can always maybe make some maneuvers with the knight and will eventually sacrifice the knight for a pawn, and then it's of course a draw. But I've calculated this position at home. I used of course an engine. I wanted to see what is now the best continuation here for black. Here in the continuing king to b4, we can play knight to g6. Now black has to maneuver the knight. Then again, white is moving the knight. We have here king to c5, knight to d7. We have king to d6. But again, here this one, king to g6. And the problem is now you have to stay with your pieces on the board, because now if of course white takes, then of course we'll take also here the pawn on f7. So here king to g7 has to be played. Now king to e7. But now very cool move, knight to f6. Here after knight to f8, we have now knight to g8. This is now the most important thing here, and then the king has to step back from the defense of the knight. King to f8, king to c5, and here after king to e7, it's of course completely winning. So brilliant game played by the dragging engine in a seemingly drawish position, I think, to pull off an aggressive attack like this, especially with this rook sacrifice on f6. Great calculations, then eventually activating the pieces. The knight was out of game, going into this almost equalish endgame with 2 pawns versus 2 pawns, rook and knight endgame. Really brilliant tactics. I really enjoyed the game. It had, I think, really beautiful elements, endgame elements, middle game strategies, even a backward pawn the dragon engine had in one particular moment of the game, but the structure that white built here never gave the opportunity for black to bring the pieces into the game to get them on the most active square. So that's why I think it was a very cool game and something worth to see. So okay, as I said, the dragon engine moved up to the semifinals, where it will play against Lila C0, and in its other semifinals we have, as I said, the Scorpion is playing against Stockfish. We'll see also what will happen in that semifinal match. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more attacking brilliancies like this, check out my Commented Chess Games Play by Computer series with some great games from the past, played by Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, Stockfish, and many more. And if you want to see humans in their best chess games, check out my Commented Chess Games, the best chess games of all time series, with also some great games from the past. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.